Young Buck vs 83 Crips. Long before his name got caught up in headlines about his run-ins with the 8-Tray gangster Crips, Young Buck had already built a reputation for being the kind of guy who didn't back down from confrontation. That side of him was on full display at the 2004 Vibe Awards, one of the most infamous nights in hip-hop award show history. That night, what started as a celebration turned chaotic in seconds. As Dr. Dre was seated at his table, an assailant, rumored to have ties to the death row camp, suddenly approached and swung on him. The room erupted. Security jumped in, people screamed, and in the middle of that mayhem was Young Buck. Witnesses recall seeing Buck pull out a knife and go straight at the attacker, stabbing him in defense of Dre before vanishing into the chaos. Police later confirmed that Buck was indeed the one who stabbed the assailant. At just 23 years old, he had already proven he was willing to risk everything for respect.
Suddenly, you can see a shiny knife in his right hand. He lunges over the top with a stabbing motion. Police say that is 23-year-old Young Buck, who then vanished.
But holding your ground in a New York award show is one thing. Navigating the layered politics and deep-rooted gang rivalries of South Central Los Angeles is something entirely different. The LA streets don't care about your Billboard chart position or who you know in the music business, and Buck was about to learn that the hard way. The incident that first put him on the radar of real Los Angeles street figures took place inside a nightclub in the city. What started off as a regular night out turned into a messy altercation involving members affiliated with the 8-Tray gangster Crips. Now the 8-Trays aren't some new age clique chasing attention. They're one of the oldest, most feared sets in Los Angeles, born from the original West Side Crips of the early 1970s. Their name comes from 83rd Street, and over the decades, they've built a reputation for being one of the most violent and deeply entrenched gangs in all of LA County. Law enforcement has long identified them as a group with hundreds of active members, and their presence stretches across neighborhoods that have seen decades of warfare. But the 8-Tray's name carries more than just street reputation. It's tied to one of the most infamous feuds in LA gang history. Their rivalry with the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips is practically a legend in the streets. Dating back to 1971, this was the conflict that split the Crips in two. From then on, every Crip neighborhood in Los Angeles had to choose a side, either with the Trays, the gangster Crips, or the Deuces, the neighborhood Crips. The divide was permanent and deadly, and it shaped decades of gang politics. So when Young Buck, a rapper from Nashville, Tennessee, ended up in a brawl with affiliates of the 8-Trays inside a Los Angeles club, it was more than just a fight. It was a collision of cultures. The story goes that Buck allegedly disrespected someone connected to the set, and things got heated fast. Words were exchanged, then fists. Witnesses said Buck and his people held their own, trading punches and slaps before security rushed in to shut everything down. Nobody pulled a gun, nobody got arrested, but the tension in that room was heavy.
And then when he seen us, he like, oh, it's like his energy turned up more. So he came towards us, yelling out, y'all, if y'all don't do drugs and all that. So, you know, me being the street, I ain't finna let a nigga get off on me first, you feel me? So I got off on him, you know what I'm saying? He fell forward towards me and locked onto my jacket, ripped my chain.
At first, people brushed it off as another example of rappers running into local drama at an LA club. But years later, Buck himself would stir the pot even further. He began claiming affiliation with the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips, the same set that had been at war with the 8-Trays for nearly half a century. He even connected publicly with Big U, one of the most respected figures from the Rollin' 60s, who implied that Buck had put in work with him back in the day.
Turn around, everybody. Like, what's up? You like, I'm like, what you said, with you? That's a nigga.
That claim completely changed the context of the nightclub incident. What had seemed like a random scuffle now looked like the beginning of something much deeper, a preview of the tension that would follow Buck for years. For the 8-Trays, disrespect from anyone was bad enough, but disrespect from someone outside of LA, someone who wasn't even born into their culture or their politics, was unforgivable. And once Buck started publicly repping the Rollin' 60s, he wasn't just stepping into a beef, he was picking a side in one of the most dangerous rivalries in Los Angeles gang history. The reaction from LA insiders was swift. Many in the city didn't buy it. Spider Loke, a known Crip who had ties to G Unit, openly laughed at Buck's claim, saying that Buck didn't have any real ties to LA or to Crip life in general. To them, it felt like he was borrowing gang culture for image, not living it, and in Los Angeles, pretending can get you hurt.
What Young Buck said, he said, "Y'all tried to jump me though. I came to show love. This Nashville first and always neighborhood 60."
Flabbergasting that he would feel comfortable not only announcing the event, but classifying himself as a neighborhood Crip is hilarious to me.
To the A-Trace, it didn't matter whether Buck was doing it for clout or connection. What mattered was the disrespect. Claiming the Rollin' 60s while having a past altercation with him was a violation that couldn't be ignored. They saw it as an outsider trying to use their world to boost his fame, and that was enough to put a permanent target on his back. The Game. Multiple attacks in Compton. Before the Game became the voice of West Coast rap and a face synonymous with Compton pride, he was just another young man trying to survive in one of the most dangerous environments in America. The backdrop was Compton, California, early 2000s, a city still struggling under the weight of decades of gang warfare, poverty, and police pressure. For kids growing up there, every block was a battlefield. Walking just a few miles to school could mean crossing through multiple gang territories, each one controlled by people who had their own flags, their own codes, and their own enemies. It was a place where a look, a word, or even a color of your clothes could turn fatal. The Game was born right into that chaos. He was raised in the Cedar Block neighborhood, the stronghold of the Cedar Block Pyru, one of the most well-known blood sets in Compton. This wasn't something he chose, it was something he inherited. His family was already deep in it. 2 of his brothers had been killed, and everyone around him was either banging, hustling, or fighting to stay alive.
Now, your parents, weren't they both Crips?
Yeah, the violence was there, but you were just accustomed to it because it was what it was. I can remember watching, being in the house watching A-Team or watching some cartoons and hearing gunshots ring out and not even flinch.
He would later admit that he was a real F-up, fully immersed in the life. He wasn't dabbling in gang culture, he was living it every day. By his late teens, he had adopted a mindset common among young men in that world, that he probably wouldn't live to see 25. With that kind of fatalism, there was no fear. If death was inevitable, why not go out fighting? That belief made him reckless, and that recklessness made him dangerous. The Game would later recall how serious he was about protecting himself. He said he never stepped outside without being armed, not with 1 gun, but 3. 1 tucked in his waistband, 1 in his car, and 1 stashed close by. He even said he used to play basketball with a Glock tucked in his shorts, just in case someone decided to start trouble while he was on the court. That's how deep it was. Violence wasn't something you ran from, it was something you prepared for. For years, he lived like that, until 2001, when everything changed. That year, the streets came for him in a way that hit closer to home than ever before. In October 2001, the Game was at home in Compton getting ready to move. He'd started to realize he couldn't stay trapped in that cycle forever, and moving out was his first step towards something better. His infant son was sitting nearby in a car seat while he packed. It was supposed to be a normal day, but the streets didn't care about his plans. A car suddenly rolled by and opened fire on his house. The sound of gunshots shattered the air, bullets tearing through walls and furniture. When the dust settled, he looked over and saw the unthinkable. A bullet had ripped through his son's car seat, passing inches from the baby's head. No one was hurt, but the psychological damage was instant. That single bullet was more powerful than any wound he'd ever taken. It was a wake-up call that the war he was fighting had no rules. Up until then, the violence had always felt like something personal, gang versus gang, enemy versus enemy. But that moment showed him that stray bullets didn't care about sides. His child had almost paid the price for the life he chose. That was the turning point. The Game decided it was time to leave Compton. But leaving didn't mean escaping. Later that same year, the streets found him again. This time, they didn't miss. Late one night, masked men broke into his house in what appeared to be a robbery or a setup. They weren't there to scare him, they were there to kill him. In a matter of seconds, they unleashed gunfire. The Game was hit 5 times. The bullets tore through his body, dropping him instantly. He hit the floor bleeding and fading fast. By the time the paramedics arrived, he was barely clinging to life.
Get the edge on him in the tussle and retrieve the gun from him. but he felt it coming, and so his finger was around the trigger of it, so he pulled the trigger, and then I got shot in the chest. Started running down the hallway to get my shotgun, my sawed-off from the back room, and he shot twice more, and I got shot in the ankle, and then I got shot in the stomach too.
Doctors managed to save him, but he slipped into a coma that lasted for 3 days. For 72 hours, he hovered between life and death. When he finally woke up, everything had changed. The game wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was reborn. That hospital bed became his crossroads. Lying there with tubes in his arms and fresh scars on his body, he realized that if he stayed on the same path, death would only come knocking again. He used those long, painful hours of recovery to think, to plan, and to redirect his energy. Instead of fighting in the streets, he decided to fight with words. Music became his way out, his new hustle. From that moment on, Jayceon Taylor shifted from a gangbanger trying to survive to a man on a mission to build something bigger. When he finally left the hospital, he was focused. He started writing, rapping, and studying the greats. The same obsession that once made him strap up before leaving the house now fueled his drive to record tracks and make it out of Compton for good. That decision birthed the game, the artist, the storyteller, the survivor. Within a few short years, he went from being a local name of the streets to dropping his debut album, The Documentary, which instantly made him a global star. He had escaped the fate that swallowed so many around him, but even with fame, the past never truly left. Even after moving to Beverly Hills, the game would later admit that he could still feel that tension, that instinct to look over his shoulder, that deep understanding of how fragile life really is. Eminem vs. Crips. When Eminem signed with Dr. Dre and stepped into the West Coast spotlight, he wasn't just entering a new phase of his career, he was walking into a minefield. The Los Angeles rap scene was layered with territorial politics, decades of gang tension, and the lingering shadow of the death row empire. By aligning with Dre, Eminem automatically inherited that tension. Even though the death row versus aftermath war had cooled down publicly, the residue of that hostility still burned quietly across the city. Coming from Detroit, Eminem wasn't built for LA street politics. He was an outsider in every sense, white, loud, successful, and backed by one of the most respected producers in hip-hop history. But in Los Angeles, fame didn't exempt you from the rules. There was an unwritten code. If you weren't from the city, you had to check in. That meant showing respect to the local gangs that ran the neighborhoods you were doing business in. In reality, though, checking in was often less about respect and more about protection money, a polite way of saying extortion.
You better check in, match ain't some gang Crip. Straight up, nigga. Crip. Straight up, nigga. Crip.
It didn't take long before Eminem's presence in LA caught attention. Word spread that he was moving around the city without paying dues, and that made him a target. The Crips, one of the most powerful and deeply rooted gangs in Los Angeles, saw an opportunity. According to people close to his camp, they began applying pressure, demanding that Eminem pay up if he wanted to move safely through the city. Eminem's team quickly realized the seriousness of the situation. Paul Rosenberg, his longtime manager and close confidant, understood what was at stake. In LA, disrespecting or ignoring the check-in rule could easily become a matter of life and death. There was no gray area. Either you complied or you got handled. But Eminem wasn't the type to fold. He refused to pay, refused to bow, and refused to let fear dictate how he operated. It was a bold move, but also a dangerous one. That decision put a massive target on his back. Without real ties to any gang or neighborhood, he had no built-in protection. In the streets of Los Angeles, that kind of defiance usually didn't end well. Rosenberg knew they needed backup, something with genuine respect on the ground, someone even the Crips wouldn't dare challenge. That's when the Booyah Tribe came into the picture. To the casual fan, they might have looked like just another rap group, but in LA, their reputation ran deep. These weren't just musicians, they were Samoan street legends, known for their size, loyalty, and heavy connections to one of the most unpredictable collectives in the city, the Sons of Samoa. The Sons of Samoa weren't about claiming blue or red. They were about family, unity, and ferocious retaliation. Their reputation was simple. If you disrespected one of theirs, you paid for it. That kind of loyalty made them one of the few groups in LA that could move freely through both Crip and Blood territories without being challenged. They didn't play by traditional rules, and that unpredictability made them feared by everyone. When Rosenberg reached out, an understanding was quickly formed. The Booyah tribe agreed to look after Eminem, offering a level of protection that no label security could provide. According to Monsta Gunja, the nephew of the group, members of the tribe personally served as bodyguards for Eminem, ensuring that no one could get close enough to test him. Once the word hit the streets that Eminem was rolling with the Booyah tribe, everything changed. The calls stopped, the threats disappeared, the same Crips who had been demanding money backed off completely. Nobody wanted to pick a fight with the Samoans. It was one thing to extort an out-of-town rapper, it was another to declare war on a crew known for going to extremes when provoked.
And didn't they do security for Eminem a little bit when M used to come out to the West Coast? Is that correct?
Yeah,
Was
well,
or
Eminem was getting extorted by some Crips.
Meaning that they're saying you can't come out here unless you pay us, or...
Yeah.
Eminem himself later gave a nod to that alliance when he appeared on Booyah Tribe's 2003 track 911, where he rapped about being backed by 40-50 Samoans. That line was a subtle reminder that even though he was an outsider, he had heavyweight protection that demanded respect. What's interesting is that Eminem didn't survive LA by pretending to be a gangster or claiming a color. He never tried to wear blue or red or fake affiliation. Instead, he stayed authentic, relying on loyalty, smart alliances, and the kind of backup that money couldn't buy. The fact that the Crips couldn't force Eminem to check in, and that Suge Knight's camp also backed off once they realized who was guarding him, solidified his place as a different kind of power player. Meek Mill Kidnap. The story begins with Loose Cannon, a documented member of the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips. In a resurfaced interview, Cannon detailed a shocking encounter involving Meek Mill, an event that allegedly went down in the heart of LA's nightlife scene. According to Cannon, the motive behind the whole thing was simple: disrespect. Meek Mill had apparently been talking reckless online, mouthing off in a way that rubbed some people in LA the wrong way. In a city where reputation and respect are everything, that kind of talk doesn't go unchecked.
Mills was talking real reckless on Twitter and stuff like that. So
talking reckless.
For the Rollin' 60s, who've long maintained control over large parts of South Central, that kind of public disrespect, especially from an outsider, was seen as an opportunity to make a statement and possibly make some quick money too. The confrontation, Cannon claimed, happened inside a Los Angeles nightclub while Meek was performing. The night was supposed to be another victory lap for the Philly rapper, who was enjoying mainstream success and industry fame at the time, but for Cannon and his crew, it was the perfect setup. He said they rolled deep, about 30 to 50 people strong, all from the neighborhood and ready to apply pressure. According to Cannon, the moment they approached Meek, the rapper's own security team froze. A few of those guards, he said, were local hires from LA who knew exactly who the Rollin' 60s were. Cannon suggested those men weren't about to risk their lives over a paycheck. In his words, $500 a day wasn't worth dying for, so instead of fighting back, they stepped aside.
You gonna pick that issue. You just getting paid $500 a day just to make sure he good, but nigga, you gonna lose your life. Is that $500 that important? It's not important. It's not that important.
What happened next is what makes the story so wild. Cannon claimed they physically grabbed Meek and walked him out of the club. Once outside, they made their demands clear. They wanted money, fast. The alleged ransom was $52,000, and they wanted it delivered to a specific location on Crenshaw and 48th Street, a neighborhood deep within their territory. To make sure things went smoothly, Cannon said they forced Meek to get on the phone with his boss at Maybach Music Group, Rick Ross, to arrange payment. Cannon described it not as a kidnapping or a robbery, but as what he called a business transaction. He insisted it wasn't about humiliation or revenge, it was about getting paid. But the threat behind the deal was unmistakable. When asked what would have happened if Rick Ross refused to send the money, Cannon's answer was blunt. Meek Mill would have ended up in the trunk.
Why'd you have him call Ross? This is crazy.
Because we needed that bag, or because
he owed y'all money.
No, he didn't owe no money. We took the money.
Oh, this was an extortion. Oh.
He also claimed that after that night, Meek made a smart move. He allegedly reached out to the late Nipsey Hussle, who was one of the most respected figures in Los Angeles and a member of the same Rollin' 60s neighborhood. Nipsey's involvement supposedly served as a peace offering, a way to smooth things over and make sure no one came after Meek again. That connection later blossomed into a genuine friendship and collaboration, which Cannon implied began out of necessity rather than just mutual respect. When the interview resurfaced years later, the story blew up online, forcing Meek Mill to respond, and his response was pure fire. He jumped on social media and immediately called the whole thing cap, a complete lie. He denied ever meeting Loose Cannon or being kidnapped in Los Angeles, saying the entire story was fabricated to get attention. Meek accused Cannon of using his name to create confusion around his federal case. He mocked the idea that anyone could hold him for ransom, arguing that someone like him, wealthy, famous, and always surrounded by people, couldn't be kidnapped without the world finding out. He even pointed out that his jewelry alone was worth more than the alleged ransom, claiming all his watches were valued at over $300,000 each. To him, the whole idea was ridiculous. He didn't stop there. Meek turned the situation into a statement of pride. He said if Cannon or anyone else had tried something like that, he would have handled it himself, putting them to God's test right there on the spot. He also made it clear that he wasn't some out-of-town rapper trying to play tough in LA. He had relationships with real people from the city, naming Nipsey Hussle, YG, and DJ Mustard as examples of the local respect he'd earned. Meek used that moment to emphasize how he and his West Coast peers had been trying to break down the old East Coast versus West Coast mentality that fueled hip-hop violence in the 90s. Still, he sent a warning to anyone trying to test him, saying he was more than willing to meet fake street bullies somewhere off the grid to take their heart. The two sides of the story couldn't be more different. On one hand, Cannon paints a picture of a brazen extortion that ended in a $52,000 payoff and a street alliance born out of survival. On the other, Meek completely denies it, calling it a clout-chasing fantasy from a man trying to clean up his own image. But here's where things get even more interesting. The story didn't stay just a rumor. According to court filings, the alleged incident actually appears in federal paperwork tied to Loose Cannon's ongoing criminal case. Cannon is facing serious federal charges, including racketeering, extortion, fraud, and even murder. And within that documentation, the so-called Meek Mill incident is listed as one of the examples of criminal activity carried out by the organization allegedly led by Cannon and its associate, Big U. Whether Meek Mill was actually kidnapped or not, the fact that it made it into federal case files adds a new layer of complexity. Tekashi 6ix9ine kidnapped. By the time Tekashi 6ix9ine hit Los Angeles, he wasn't just another rapper coming to town. He was a walking headline, a rainbow-haired lightning rod for controversy. His arrival stirred up tension the minute he stepped off the plane, mostly because of his loud personality and total disregard for the city's unwritten street codes. In LA, respect runs deep. Every artist, no matter how big, is expected to check in when they move through the city, basically paying respect, acknowledging the local power structures, and, in many cases, paying a street tax to ensure their safety. It's a rule as old as the streets themselves, but Tekashi didn't care. He made it clear he wasn't checking in with anybody. He taunted LA gang members online, bragging that he could move however he wanted, even daring people to come test him. That kind of energy doesn't fly in Los Angeles. When he came to perform during NBA All-Star Weekend in 2018, his shows were abruptly canceled because of security concerns. But insiders knew the real reason. There were credible threats from local gangs who felt disrespected. They were waiting for him to slip up. Tekashi was out in LA, moving like he was invincible, flashing money, throwing gang signs, and talking reckless. The fact that he managed to leave the city without a scratch only made him feel more untouchable. But that false sense of safety wouldn't last long. A few months later, the tension followed him right back to the spotlight. In November 18, he was shooting a music video in Beverly Hills with Kanye West and Nicki Minaj. A massive moment that should have been pure celebration. Instead, it turned into chaos. Out of nowhere, gunfire erupted outside the mansion where they were filming. Police responded immediately, shutting down the set and confirming shots had been fired. No one was hit, but the message was clear. Someone was sending a warning. Prosecutors would later point to that shooting as part of a pattern of escalating violence orbiting Tekashi's career. But that was the only West Coast side of his problems. The real storm was brewing back home in New York. Tekashi was tangled up with one of the most dangerous street crews in the city, the 9 Trey Gangsta Bloods. They had helped fuel his rise, offering him authenticity and muscle in exchange for exposure and money. But like all street business relationships, it eventually went sour.
When I first met the gang, right? There was no ill intention, no bad intention, no ill will. Just so happened it clicked. Gummo took off, right? We see the success of Gummo. We said, let's repeat it. Let's do Cuda now.
By mid-2018, Tekashi had fallen out with his team. He fired several members of his crew and publicly distanced himself from the Nitre Bloods, accusing them of stealing money from him. What he didn't realize was that those same men were plotting revenge behind his back. The FBI later intercepted phone calls where his former allies discussed plans to super-violate him, a threat that implied something far worse than just a beating. Then came July 2018. The night everything changed. Tekashi was in Brooklyn, riding home after a long day in the studio. According to court testimony, a vehicle started following him from DeKalb Avenue. Moments later, it rammed his car. He was dragged out, pistol whipped, and forced into another vehicle. Inside, he was beaten and robbed, his attackers taking about $750,000 in jewelry and $35,000 in cash. The entire thing was caught, at least in part, on video. One of his kidnappers was later identified as Anthony Harv Ellison, a man Tekashi had once considered family. Somehow, Tekashi managed to escape. After being dumped near his home, he ran for help and was taken to the hospital. But the kidnapping wasn't just a random act of violence, it was the breaking point. He realized that the very people he thought protected him were actually trying to destroy him. That night marked the start of one of hip-hop's most infamous betrayals. When federal agents closed in on the Nitre Gangsta Bloods, Tekashi made a choice that would define his legacy forever. He flipped. He cooperated with authorities, taking the stand and testifying against the same gang that helped make him famous. His testimony took what could have been a 32-year-to-life sentence and reduced it to less than 2 years behind bars.
No, first night I got locked up, I watched Lone Survivor. And I was like, I'm definitely snitching, right? and then, no, seriously.
So from the jump,
But that decision came with a lifelong price. In the streets, snitching is the ultimate offense. Overnight, Tekashi 6ix9ine went from rap's loudest provocateur to its most hated man. He wasn't just a marked man in New York, he was a target everywhere. The same gangs he had disrespected in Los Angeles now had every reason to come for him. Even behind bars, the danger didn't disappear. While being processed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, Tekashi reportedly faced immediate threats from Crip members. They hadn't forgotten his history of running his mouth online, throwing up opposing gang signs and mocking people he had no business mocking. His status as an informant only made things worse. Prison officials had to move him multiple times just to keep him alive. When Tekashi was finally released, he tried to go back to his old life, posting online, trolling, and flaunting his money like nothing had changed. But the street politics didn't forget. In March 2023, he found out the hard way that no amount of fame could shield him forever. While working out at an LA Fitness in Lake Worth, Florida, he was ambushed in the locker room by several men. They beat him badly, leaving him bloodied on the floor before running off with his belongings. The attackers, later identified as Rafael Medina Jr., Anthony Maldonado, and Octavius Medina, were arrested. But the reason behind the assault was so obvious to anyone paying attention. It wasn't just random violence, it was payback. Whether or not these men were directly tied to Nitre didn't matter. In the world of street politics, Tekashi had broken the unbreakable rule, and anyone loyal to those codes felt justified in putting hands on him. What makes the story almost poetic in a dark way is how everything came full circle. The same arrogance that made him taunt gangs in Los Angeles, the same energy that made him believe he couldn't be touched, ended up haunting him across the country. 50 Cent's inherited war against Suge Knight. When 50 Cent touched down in Los Angeles under Dr. Dre's wing in the early 2000s, he was stepping straight into a war zone that had been simmering for years, and it all traced back to Suge Knight. The bad blood between Suge and Dr. Dre had been brewing since the mid-1990s. Back in 1996, Dre made a move that shocked the industry. He walked away from Death Row Records. He gave up everything just for peace of mind. But Suge didn't see it as peace. He saw it as betrayal. Dre leaving Death Row wasn't just the loss of a business partner, it was the unraveling of Suge's empire. And the moment Dre rebuilt his legacy with Aftermath Entertainment, bringing in a new generation of stars like Eminem and later 50 Cent, Suge made it clear that he viewed all of them as enemies. When 50 Cent joined the Aftermath family, he was stepping right into that storm. He once said it felt like being a New York Knick in the LA Lakers locker room. He knew the tension. He knew Suge Knight's reputation. The man had gang ties stretching deep into both the Bloods and Crips. Rumors had long circulated that Suge had once plotted to have Dre killed after he left death row, and 50 Cent wasn't taking that lightly. Things came to a boiling point in 2003 during a shoot for 50 Cent's breakout hit In Da Club. The video was filmed in Compton, Dre's old backyard, and Suge's territory. What was supposed to be a celebration of 50's rise turned into a real-life standoff. Midway through the shoot, Suge Knight pulled up unannounced, deep as usual, rolling with around 30 men, a mix of Blood and Crip affiliates, and even some known Mexican gang members. The plan was simple: make their presence felt, intimidate Dre's new golden boy, and remind everyone that death row still had power in these streets. The second Suge showed up, the entire set shifted. You could feel the tension in the air. Most people on site scattered. Nobody wanted to get caught in the crossfire if things went left, but 50 Cent and his crew didn't flinch. Tony Yayo, Lloyd Banks, and even Eminem held their ground. Eminem, often labeled as the soft rapper from Detroit by street circles, shocked everyone. He didn't back down. He was ready to fight. That moment changed the entire energy. 50 Cent and his team moved towards Suge's men, not away from them.
This is why I always respected Eminem, 50, and that was with us. So Suge came, he had some Mexican. Now we from New York. You ain't never seen a with a tattoo on his forehead. And was real. He's like, I don't give a man. This is when I knew. I'm like, damn, Eminem is a real. These niggas 50 outside, what's up?
That boldness, that refusal to be intimidated, made Suge realize his scare tactics weren't going to work on these guys. He eventually backed off, leaving without a single shot fired. Still, the feud didn't stop there. The tension between the two camps followed them coast to coast. In 2004, at the Vibe Awards in New York City, it exploded again. Dr. Dre was about to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award when a man suddenly ran up and punched him in the face. Within seconds, the whole place turned into chaos. The rumor mill quickly started spinning, with many believing the attacker had ties to Suge Knight or his death row circle. But Dre didn't have to fight alone. G-Unit was there. Tony Yayo and Young Buck jumped into action immediately. Yayo later admitted he was risking his parole by even being there, but he wasn't going to let anyone touch Dre. The real moment of madness came from Young Buck. In the middle of the chaos, Buck grabbed a knife and stabbed the attacker, Jimmy Johnson. He was later arrested and charged with assault and attempted murder, but in the end, he caught a lucky break, walking away with probation and community service instead of prison time.
Entertainer, also known as Young Buck, was charged in connection with an attack Monday night at the Vibe Awards.
Mr. Brown was arrested for 1 count of attempted murder and 1 count of assault with a deadly weapon.
That incident proved something powerful. 50 Cent's camp wasn't just loyal, they were fearless. They didn't just rap about being gangsters or soldiers, they lived like it. Every man around 50 was ready to fight or die for the team. Even after those explosive encounters, the tension lingered in Los Angeles. Whenever 50 Cent and his crew rolled through the city, their convoys were followed or harassed by Crip sets. There were near shootouts, tense standoffs, and constant threats, but no one ever got the upper hand. 50 Cent had built his image on being untouchable, and moments like those only reinforced it. By the mid-2000s, Suge Knight's empire was crumbling. His once feared label was drowning in lawsuits and bankruptcy, while Dre and 50 Cent's camp continued to dominate.